You shouldn't be hearing this. You should be praying or begging for forgiveness on your knees on a stone floor until the bones in my legs pierce through the skin. But, honestly, I've knelt enough already. I knelt for my mother, for a God who never spoke to me, and for a promise that was never mine. Now, who am I? Just an ex-priest with fucked up legs, a past that reeks of guilt, and something buried in the backyard that breathes when the moon is full. But hold on. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Ailton. I was born on a small ranch, surrounded by dust, prayers, and things that were only spoken in hushed tones. My father was a drunk, one of those who live with their face buried in a bottle, and the rest of the family carries the consequences. My mother, on the other hand, was the opposite, devout, ferocious, praying the rosary on her knees on the cold floor, the beads cutting into her fingers. And, of course, she made sure to drag the children along. But the strongest figure of my childhood was my great-grandmother. She was something else. People called her a healer. Others called her a witch, but never to her face. She healed with herbs, psalms mixed with words in languages that no one else knew. People came from far away to be blessed, and I was the only grandson who stayed there beside her, holding jars, collecting leaves, listening to the whispers. She taught me without teaching, and I learned everything, without even realizing it, until my father got sick. His liver couldn't take it anymore. Death began to circle. My mother, desperate, dragged me on a pilgrimage of more than 10 hours to a temple and made a promise for me. If my husband survives, my son Ailton will be given to the Lord. He will be a priest, far from that damn witchcraft of the old woman. I was 12 years old. She looked at me with tearful eyes, but firm. You have no choice, my son. It's that or your father dies. At that moment, I swear by everything I have that I thought, then let him die. But I didn't say it. I swallowed the tears, as I'd learned to do since forever, and walked on. I took each step as if I was marching to a funeral. My father survived, but only for a few more months. He went back to drinking, and then neither prayer nor maidenhair fern root saved him. And even so, my mother made me keep the promise. She shoved me into a seminary, far from my grandmother, far from the leaves, far from myself. I spent years there, praying without faith, memorizing psalms that never went down my throat right. When she died, I didn't know. I found out months later. I didn't even have the right to say goodbye. The life I wanted died with her. I became a priest, a good priest, according to those who saw me from the outside. I worked in several small towns until I was sent to a remote village, where my work would make a difference, according to the bishop. There I met Franciela. She and her mother, Donna Aparecida, came to offer me help in the rectory. Food, cleaning, whatever was needed. I accepted. But, from the first day, something about her captivated me. Franciela had a melancholic sweetness, as if she had a sadness that she couldn't explain, but that painted everything around her with a beautiful silence. And, of course, I was a man, priest or not. Over time, I began to look forward to her visits, to time the steps she took around the house, to hear her voice even when she wasn't around. And then, I did what I should never have done. Asterisk, asterisk, I cast a love spell. I used everything my grandmother had taught me. I stole a strand of her hair. I took a forgotten piece of clothing. I wrapped it all in a piece of old fabric and buried it in the backyard, along with a note. May you love me, even if it's not real. May we meet, even if it's in hell. I watered the spell with cedar root tea and a few drops of my blood. Yes, I was a priest. Yes, I was in sin. But that night, when I buried that, I felt something moving in the earth even before I finished, as if the earth had swallowed it happily. 2 weeks later, Franciela began to change. She came more often. She stared at me for long seconds. She blushed when I smiled, until one day we were alone, and she kissed me, or I kissed her. I don't know anymore. I only know that on that day, the cassock fell, and with it, I fell too. The day I slept with Franciela was the day everything changed, but not in a beautiful way, like in books. It was silent, profane, as if the whole house knew, as if the saints on the walls had turned their faces away while we kissed, and yet, it was the most alive moment of my life. She was trembling. I was trembling more. It was her first time, mine too for real, and, when it was over, she lay on my chest and cried. I don't know if from joy, fear, or regret. Maybe all of them together. This is wrong, isn't it, Father? She whispered. Yes, I replied, but I would do it all again. And we did, more times than I can count. Franciela became my refuge, my drug, but the worst is that I knew she was only there because of me, because of the spell. I had shaped her will. And, even if she said I love you, I never knew if it was real, or if it was just magic pulsing under her skin. It tore me apart inside, but I couldn't stop. When her mother got sick, and Franciela started coming alone, everything became easier, and more dangerous. We started sleeping together every week. She cooked for me, slept with me, called me my love. And one night, out of nowhere, she looked me in the eyes with a shy smile and said, I think I'm pregnant. The world spun, but I didn't faint. I smiled. For a second, I imagined that God was giving me a new chance, a new beginning. But what I didn't know, what neither of us knew, is that the spell I buried was still alive, and that what was growing inside Franciela wasn't just a baby. The following weeks were of hidden euphoria. We pretended to be normal, but deep down, we knew the house of cards was shaking. I made plans to run away, to save money, steal an old car, disappear from the city. Franciela, she dreamed of a boy with our features, with brown eyes and the same crooked nose that I hated in myself. But things started to go off the rails, everything very slowly, almost imperceptibly. First were the dreams. She started waking up crying, saying she saw my grandmother, the same one who taught me how to mess with herbs and enchantments. She looks at me angry, Ailton. She talks to me without opening her mouth. She tells me that something went wrong, that you tied the knot wrong. I tried to console her. I said it was just guilt, fear, pregnancy. But I dreamed too, with earth moving, with roots that wrapped around Franciela's legs while she screamed my name, with a mouth in the middle of her belly opening, whispering words in a language I never heard. I woke up sweating, my heart racing, the taste of clay in my mouth. In the 8th week of gestation, she began to bleed. Little, dark, strange drops. We went to the city doctor. He said the fetus was ... fine. But he looked at Franciela with a strange look, as if he had seen something that he didn't want to comment on. Just rest, avoid stress. It's just a small hormonal instability. Instability, he said, but I knew it was the spell. It was the price. That night, while she slept, I went to the backyard and dug. I dug the place where I buried the work. I needed to ... undo it. But when I opened the grave, swear to God the cloth package wasn't there. There was a hole, deep, as if something had dug from the inside out, and in place of the fabric, there was only ... a sliver of bone, with my name scratched on it. I went back into the house with trembling hands, covered in dirt. Franciela was standing in the hallway, eyes down. I woke up to a noise, she whispered, a noise coming from inside my belly. I looked at her, she looked at me, and in that instant, I knew. It wasn't just a child she was carrying. It was something else. Something that listened. Something that grew ... too fast. Something that had my magical signature marked in blood. If you've ever buried a secret in the backyard, you might know what it's like to open the earth, expecting to find what you hid, and see nothing there anymore. It wasn't as if someone had dug up the spell. It was as if it had never been buried, or worse ... as if it had left on its own. Franciela said she heard noises from inside her belly, and I started to hear it too. In the silence of the night, with my head pressed against her skin, I heard beats, but not from the baby's heart. It was as if something was scraping inside, like claws scratching the inside of the uterus, and I pretended not to hear, because, if I admitted it, everything would fall apart. But the truth is that, at 3 months of pregnancy, Franciela's body began to change. Not like that of a normal pregnant woman. The veins on her belly darkened. They became visible like roots under the skin. She said she felt stabs, not kicks, but as if they were stretching her body from the inside out. Signora Aparecida was already better. She came back to visit her daughter. It didn't take long to realize that something was wrong. "You're different, Franciela. What's wrong? Why didn't you tell me anything about this pregnancy?" And that's when the whispers started. The city is small, and nothing escapes the mouth of those who live bored. They started talking about me and Franciela, about how she was different, about how she walked silent, about how she avoided sunlight, preferring to lock herself at home with the windows closed. One day, I went to the church, as usual, but no one showed up. Not a soul to confess, not a faithful to light a candle. The candles, in fact, were all extinguished as if the altar itself had been abandoned. That's when I saw the note left on the front pew. "The priest has sinned, and God sees everything." That night, Franciela had a crisis. She screamed so much that the neighbors called the village doctor. He came, but left as white as chalk. He said he had no idea what was growing inside her. He said that the sound of the ultrasound seemed like a muffled growl, that there was no clear bone formation, and that the thing in her uterus ... blinked. Blinked. After that, the city turned into hell. People gathered in the square, whispers turning into screams. Someone swore they had seen Franciela in front of the mirror, talking to herself ... with her belly. Another said he heard noises coming from the church at night, dragging steps, muttered prayers in languages that were not Latin. And then, the worst. A boy, the neighbor's son, appeared with a fever, saying that a girl with a shadow baby stood at the door of his room, smiling. And that's when everything fell apart. They called me aside in the street. One of the elders of the city, one of those who claimed to be more Christian than Christ himself, grabbed me by the arm. "We already know what you did, Father, about the witchcraft, about the girl. She carries evil, and you ... you will pay with your skin." I tried to run away. I started packing. I was going to run away with Franciela that same night, but she was no longer the same. She was lying on the floor of the room, naked, muttering words that didn't even seem human. Her body was trembling. Her belly moved as if something wanted to get out, but not like a birth, like an escape. I tried to hold her. She scratched my face, her eyes completely black for a second. "He is hungry," she whispered. "He wants to be born where he came in, and you will open the way, Ailton." At that moment, the world turned to shadow, and the door was broken down. The crowd entered, not with torches and pitchforks like in the movies, but with the Bible in their hands and hatred in their eyes. They dragged me outside. Franciela screamed behind me, and her mother cried so much that it seemed she was going to faint. I was beaten, stepping, punching, spitting. They shouted that I was the devil. And then someone shouted, "Let's take it out of her, before it's born and curses us all." The last thing I saw was Franciela's figure being carried in her arms by two men. She screamed, "No, he hasn't arrived yet. Don't touch him. He's still forming." And then only darkness. I wake up in the dark. The air smells of rust and mold. My legs don't move. The world is just pain, pulsing in waves under the skin. The sound around is of tires on the road. I'm in a car, someone driving. I try to speak, but only a dry noise comes out of my throat. My mouth is cracked, my face swollen. The driver looks in the rearview mirror and sees that I woke up. He introduces himself as Severino. He says he found me thrown in a thicket near a rural road, with my legs broken and my face disfigured. I thought it was a dead dog, but I saw that he was breathing. He took me to the nearest city. Hospital, hospitalization, surgeries. It took me months to fully regain consciousness. But even with the bones healing, what hurt the most was not knowing what they had done to Franciela, or with ... with that. I left the hospital before being discharged. I stole my own clothes and left limping like a zombie with crutches. I returned to the village, but it ... no longer existed. The road was deserted. The bush covered the dirt tracks. The houses seemed burned from the inside, as if they had been devoured by something invisible. The church, once white and illuminated, was now just rubble, and the house where I lived ... was no longer there. Nothing but ashes and marks on the ground. Circular marks, as if something had been ripped from the earth. I went back to living in the city, begging, sleeping in shelters when I could, but always waking up at 3:03 in the morning, always hearing the same sound. Scratches, whispers, light, almost childish taps, and sometimes a laugh. That laugh, Franciela's laugh, the first time she read the Bible with me, now mixed with a wet sound like flesh rubbing against stone. Months passed. One day, while begging in front of a pharmacy, I saw a boy standing across the street. He was no more than 10 years old. Dark hair, thin. He wore clothes that seemed old. But what paralyzed me were his eyes. They weren't a child's. They were mine. The same color, the same anger, the same emptiness. He stared at me for almost a whole minute, without blinking, without breathing, it seemed. And then he smiled. He walked away running, but without haste, as if he knew that seeing me was just the beginning. Since then, he appears, always in the reflection, in the bus window, in the water of the bucket I use to wash my face in the shelter, even in the cracked mirror of the guest house where I can sometimes sleep. He's there, standing behind me, smiling with that sickly calm. And now, even in my dreams, he doesn't scream, he doesn't run. He just watches me, and when I get closer, he says, "You planted me, remember, and now I've grown." That night, After the boy in the reflection smiled at me once more, I decided I couldn't run anymore. I needed to go back, not to the village that was swallowed by some ancient silence, but to the exact place where I buried the spell, where I buried the seed. I hitched rides with truck drivers, slept in bus stations, hid from night guards. It took 3 days to find the old dirt shortcut, the one that led to the church house. I don't know how my body endured. Each step was pain, but something in me pushed or pulled. When I arrived, there was nothing, just earth, dry grass, and a row of trees that seemed dead on their feet. But as soon as I approached the backyard, I smelled a familiar smell. Flesh burned. I knelt on the earth, where one day I planted the package with Franciela's hair and the spell note, that same bundle wrapped in cloth and promise. I dug with my bare hands. I cut my fingers. I broke 2 nails, until I found not what I buried, but something different. A wooden box the size of a fetus. It was wrapped in dark rags and dry stains. I opened it. Inside there was something that looked like a doll, but was made of flesh. It had human eyes sewn on with leather thread, and the mouth was alive. It moved. It whispered, "Dad." I threw the box away and vomited. I cried until my chest burned. I felt like a child again, hearing my mother pray and my grandmother saying that what you plant with desire grows with hunger. I returned to the road like a man fleeing his own name. But now, it wasn't just the boy in the reflection. It was her too, the doll, the thing, the voice that now accompanied me even when I was awake. At night, I hear whispers inside my pillow. I feel small hands trying to open my eyes. One morning, I woke up and my walker wasn't in place. I looked in the dark, groping with fear. I found it, but when I touched it, I felt something strange. The metal was warm, as if it had been held by someone minutes before. Franciela never appeared again. Not in the newspapers. Not in the stories I hear from old people in the soup line. But sometimes, I see a woman with empty eyes staring at me from across the street, and she holds a child, or what seems to be a child. The child never moves, never blinks, but smiles, with my mouth. I don't know what I brought to birth, but I know the thing belongs to me, and maybe it's growing. Maybe it's already following others. Maybe you've already seen something like that. A shadow behind you in the mirror. A sound of small footsteps in the hallway. A voice in the dark calling your name wrong. If it happens, don't answer. And for the love of everything holy, don't light a candle. In the next and last part, I will tell you what happened in the shelter, and why I write this here as a warning, not to beg for mercy, but to remind you, what we plant with witchcraft never dies. It only waits for the time to be born. If you've made it this far, you must be expecting a conclusion, some kind of ending, justice, or redemption. Sorry, there is none. This story doesn't end, it just moves. After I found that thing in the earth's, the flesh doll with human eyes and a mouth that whispered father, my body got worse. But it wasn't just the physical. Something inside me broke. I spent weeks wandering until I managed to find shelter in a reception center in another city. One of those places where no one asks anything because everyone has already lost something or someone that they can't explain. The assistants called me Sue Alton. They said I was calm despite dreaming loudly. Literally, I screamed at night. Sometimes I spoke in languages that I didn't even know. Other times, I answered questions that no one asked. One of the employees, named Daniel, was the first to notice. He found me in the early morning, standing, without a walker, in the TV room. I was with my eyes open, but I was sleeping. He said I was holding a lit candle in my hands, and that I murmured, "She is still pregnant. The light is not born alive. Hunger will choose a name." After that, Daniel began to have nightmares. He saw a child with grey skin and eyelidless eyes crawling through the corridors. He said the thing smelled of iron and sour milk. I asked for a leave of absence days later. I said I couldn't sleep anymore. Another volunteer asked me one afternoon if I believed in entities that feed on interrupted love. I answered yes, and I added, but interrupted love is just another name for sacrifice. Franciela continues to be missing. My son, or the thing that grew from the spell, doesn't let me forget. Every time I try to pray, my mouth locks. Every time I try to sleep, I hear knocks on the wall. Sometimes there are 3, sometimes there are 5, but never 4, because my grandmother said that 4 is the number of a living cross, and a living cross only accepts 2 destinies. Either you carry it, or you are nailed to it. Yesterday, for the first time, I saw it. Really, the child. Or better, that which was born of desire, witchcraft, and sin. She came to me in the bathroom mirror. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stood there, looking at me with my own eyes, smiling with a mouth that was once mine. And she said, "Dad, now it's your turn to be born." The light went out. The candle on the altar of the shelter lit itself. And when the others ran to see what was happening, I was no longer there. If you find a child that smiles with the mouth of someone you loved, run. If she says your name, run faster. And if it's night and there is a lit candle for no reason, and you smell sour milk and scrap iron, it's not an illusion. It's me. It's me coming to be born again. And this time, someone will have to love me until the end.